Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is provided strictly for educational and entertainment purposes. It does not constitute legal, financial, or psychological advice. Navigating the complexities of family law, divorce proceedings, or historical analysis involves significant personal and legal risk. Therefore, you must conduct your own due diligence and consult with a licensed professional in your jurisdiction before making any decisions based on the information presented here. Imagine standing in a wood-paneled living room in 1938. The only light in the room is the warm, amber glow of a vacuum tube-powered radio. Millions of Americans are huddled around their sets, paralyzed by the voice of Orson Welles describing an alien invasion. That night, the boundaries between reality and fiction blurred so intensely that it sparked nationwide panic. But here is the chilling part. The same psychological mechanisms used to captivate and manipulate that audience 80 years ago are being mirrored today in the high-stakes theater of the American family court system. While one era used sound effects and scripts to simulate a crisis, modern men often find themselves living in a script they didn't write, facing a legal broadcast that threatens to mute their voices entirely. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the strange, symbiotic history of American radio drama, and why the dramatic structures perfected by Golden Age broadcasters are the exact same frameworks used in modern divorce litigation to frame men as the antagonists in their own lives. The problem we are solving today is one of narrative control. For the modern American man, a divorce is rarely just a legal filing. It is a battle for the story of who he is as a father, a provider, and a human being. By the end of this deep dive masterclass, you will understand how the Golden Age of radio perfected the art of the character archetype, and how these archetypes are weaponized in 21st century courtrooms. We are going to look at historical trends, case studies of broadcast psychology, and the potential outcomes for those who fail to recognize when they are being scripted into a losing role. To understand where we are, we have to go back to the 1920s and 30s, the era when the radio became the first mass mind medium. Before television, the ear was the gateway to the American psyche. Producers discovered that because the audience couldn't see the performers, they had to rely on theatrical shorthand. This meant creating broad, easily recognizable characters: the hero, the damsel in distress, and the villain. There was no room for nuance. If a character sounded gruff, he was the antagonist. If a character spoke in a high, trembling register, they were the victim. This was the birth of the theater of the mind, and it was incredibly effective at bypassing the logical brain and hitting the emotional core. Now, fast forward to a modern deposition or a temporary orders hearing. The legal system, much like an old radio play, often operates on these same truncated archetypes. Because judges and evaluators are overwhelmed with massive caseloads, they frequently fall back on narrative shorthand. If a man enters the courtroom without understanding how to manage his broadcast, he risks being cast in the role of the aggressor or the absentee, regardless of the facts. We see a historical trend where the person who controls the initial narrative, the opening act, often dictates the trajectory of the entire series. Let's look at the data regarding the first mover advantage in both broadcasting and legal filings. In the golden age of radio, the show that captured the 7 p.m. slot usually held the audience for the entire evening. In modern domestic relations, the petitioner, the one who files first, is essentially the producer of the show. They set the tone, define the conflict, and establish the initial character sketches for the court. For men, being the respondent often feels like being an actor who walked onto a set halfway through the second act, only to realize the script says they are supposed to lose. Consider the case study of The Shadow, one of the most popular radio dramas of the 1930s. Its famous tagline, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?" wasn't just a catchy intro. It was a psychological hook that played on the audience's inherent suspicion of the unknown. In the context of a high-conflict divorce, the unknown is the man's private life. Opposing counsel often uses the shadow technique, hinting at hidden evils or character flaws without providing concrete evidence, relying instead on the court's imagination to fill in the blanks. This is theater of the mind applied to the legal process. If you aren't providing a clear, consistent, and high-fidelity broadcast of your own life, the court will listen to the static provided by the other side. We also need to examine the evolution of sound and perception. In the 1940s, Foley artists used simple tools to create complex illusions. A piece of crinkled cellophane sounded like a roaring fire. A pair of coconut shells sounded like a galloping horse. In a modern divorce, we see legal Foley. This is the practice of taking a mundane, everyday event and adding sound effects to make it sound catastrophic. A father being 5 minutes late for a pickup isn't just a timing issue. In the scripted drama of the courtroom, it is amplified into a consistent pattern of parental alienation and neglect. The cellophane is being crinkled, and the judge is hearing a wildfire. The transition from the golden age of radio to the age of the nuclear family divorce is not a coincidence. Both are deeply rooted in the American transition from rural community-based living to the isolated suburban lifestyle. In a small town in 1910, the community knew your character because they saw you every day. Your broadcast was your life. But by the 1950s, as radio gave way to television and society became more fragmented, we began to rely more on institutional narratives. We stopped trusting what we saw and started trusting what was filed or broadcast. For men, this shift meant that their reputation was no longer held by their neighbors, but by a file folder in a county clerk's office. This part of our deep dive focuses on the scripting phase. In radio, every word was meticulously timed to fit a 30-minute window. In divorce, every text message, email, and social media post is a line of dialogue being written for a future episode in front of a judge. Men often make the mistake of ad-libbing. They react emotionally, they break character when provoked, and they fail to realize that the microphones, in the form of digital footprints, are always live. If you are going through a transition, you are no longer a private citizen. You are a protagonist in a highly scrutinized drama. We have to discuss the producers of these legal dramas, the attorneys. A high-conflict divorce attorney operates much like a radio director. Their job is to heighten the tension, clarify the stakes, and ensure the audience, the judge, stays engaged with their version of the story. They use cliffhangers, temporary motions, and emergency hearings to keep the pressure on. They understand that in the absence of a compelling counter-narrative, the loudest broadcast wins. To navigate this, one must understand the acoustics of the courtroom. Just as a radio studio is treated with foam to prevent echoes, a man's legal strategy must be treated to prevent emotional echoes. This means stripping away the noise of anger and resentment so that the signal, the facts of his involvement as a father and his stability as a provider, can be heard clearly. Historical trends suggest that men who adopt a broadcast mindset, treating every interaction as if it were being recorded for a national audience, see more favorable potential outcomes than those who treat the process as a private, emotional vent. The parallels are endless. The commercial breaks in a radio show are the periods of waiting between court dates, where the momentum of the case can stall or be redirected. The sponsors are the various stakeholders, guardian ad litems, social workers, and evaluators, who have a vested interest in the program continuing. Understanding that you are inside a structured historical narrative is the first step toward regaining control. You are not just fighting a legal battle. You are competing for the airwaves of truth, in a system that was built on the foundations of dramatic storytelling. Stay tuned, because as we move into the next sections, we will break down the specific sound effects of the legal system and how to ensure your broadcast remains crystal clear. To truly grasp the mechanics of a modern legal conflict, we must examine the specific acoustic engineering of the 1930s radio studio and how it translates to the modern-day high-conflict divorce. In the Golden Age, a production was only as good as its soundscape. If an actor was supposed to be walking through a dense forest, the audience didn't see trees. They heard the Foley artist snapping bundles of dry broom straw to simulate footsteps on dead branches. In the current year 2026, we see a parallel in the way legal teams construct an atmosphere of crisis. Imagine a man named David, a software engineer in Austin, who is currently navigating a standard custody dispute. David believes the facts of his involvement as a father will speak for themselves. However, he fails to realize that the opposing side is busy snapping the broom straw. They are taking his late nights at the office, intended to provide for the family's future, and re-engineering the sound to resemble parental abandonment. This is the first sound effect of the legal system, the amplification of the mundane. In radio drama, the concept of signal-to-noise ratio was everything. If the background noise was too loud, the audience lost the dialogue. In a courtroom, the dialogue is your evidence, but the noise is the emotional turbulence injected into the record. Historical trends in family law suggest that the more noise present in a case, the harder it is for a judge to discern the actual signal of a father's fitness. When an attorney files a motion filled with adjectives rather than verbs, they are increasing the noise. Instead of saying the father missed a weekend, they say the father flagrantly disregarded the sacred temporal boundaries of the custodial agreement. The goal is to create a distorted broadcast where the man's defense is drowned out by the static of accusation. To counter this, a man must become his own sound engineer. He must ensure that his communications are low noise and high signal. This means every email must be clinical, brief, and stripped of the emotional reverb that the other side can use to distort his character. Let us look at a case study from the 1940s involving the legendary radio program Suspense. The producers knew that silence was often more terrifying than a scream. They would use a long, pregnant pause to build anxiety in the listener, forcing the audience to project their own worst fears into the quiet. We see this exact tactic used in modern litigation during the discovery phase. When a man is served with a massive request for production, demanding 10 years of bank statements, every text message ever sent, and a list of every person he has spoken to in the last 24 months, the goal is often to create a silence. The opposing side waits for the man to panic, to stumble, or to fail to provide a single document, which they then use to create a narrative of concealment. They want the court to wonder what is lurking in that silence. In 2026, the potential outcomes for a man who does not maintain a meticulous digital archive are often dictated by these created silences. By failing to have his own record, he allows the opposing side to script the missing pieces of the story. Another critical element of radio drama was the use of the narrator. Think of the whistler or the host of Inner Sanctum Mysteries. These figures stood outside the action but told the audience how to feel about it. In the American legal system, the narrator role is occupied by the guardian ad litem, or the court-appointed evaluator. These individuals are tasked with providing an objective view, but just like a radio narrator, they are susceptible to the script. If one party provides a more compelling, dramatic, and consistent story from the beginning, the narrator is likely to adopt that script as the baseline for their own report. Imagine if David in Austin treats his meetings with the evaluator as a casual chat, while the other side treats it like a high-stakes broadcast performance. The narrator will inevitably pick up the more dominant signal. Historical data indicates that the first impression made on these court neutrals often persists through the entire duration of the case, regardless of subsequent evidence. This is why the broadcast must be crystal clear from the very first transmission. The step-by-step process of cleaning up your broadcast begins with a concept called dead air. In radio, dead air is a catastrophe. It is the absence of a signal. In divorce, dead air is your greatest weapon. When you receive a provocative, angry, or insulting text message from an ex-spouse, the instinctive reaction is to broadcast back with equal volume. However, the professional broadcaster knows that responding to static only creates more static. By maintaining dead air, refusing to engage with the emotional noise, you force the other side to continue broadcasting their own instability. When that record is played back in court, the contrast is stark. On one side, you have a frantic, high-volume transmission of anger. On the other, you have the calm, consistent signal of a man who refuses to be pulled into the drama. The judge, acting as the listener, will naturally gravitate toward the signal that sounds more stable and reliable. We must also consider the historical shift in how American audiences consume stories. In the 1930s, people listened together in a communal setting. Today we consume information in silos. This reflects the isolation many men feel during a divorce. They feel as though their broadcast is going out into a void where no one is listening. This psychological isolation was actually a theme used in the 1943 radio play The Man Who Couldn't Lose. The protagonist became so confident in his own narrative that he stopped paying attention to the reality around him. For men in 2026, the risk is the same. They can become so focused on their own sense of injustice, their own internal broadcast, that they lose sight of the legal reality of the courtroom. The courtroom is a specific frequency. If you are broadcasting on the frequency of fairness and logic, but the court is tuned to the frequency of best interests of the child and statutory guidelines, your message will never be received. You must learn to modulate your voice to the frequency the court is actually monitoring. To illustrate the stakes, imagine a scenario where a man loses his ability to see his children not because of any actual wrongdoing, but because of a series of poorly timed sound effects. He loses his temper during a phone call, which is recorded. That 1 minute of audio is then played on a loop, effectively becoming the theme song of his entire legal case. This is the danger of the hot mic. In a radio studio, the red light indicates the mic is live. In 2026, for a man in divorce, the red light is always on. Every interaction is a potential broadcast. Every witness is a potential member of the audience. By understanding the history of how narratives are constructed through sound and repetition, we can begin to see the legal process for what it is: a competition for the most credible script. As we move forward in this masterclass, we have to look deeper into the archetypes that were established in those early broadcasts. Why is the trope of the bumbling, incompetent father so prevalent in American media? And how does that historical caricature affect the way a judge views your parenting plan? We will explore how to rewrite that script and move from a supporting character in someone else's drama to the executive producer of your own life. But first, we must confront the most powerful tool in the radio dramatist's arsenal, one that is used daily in family courts across the country to create a sense of urgency and fear. It is the concept of the ticking clock, the artificial deadline designed to force a settlement before the full story can be told. In the next part, we will break down how to stop the clock and regain control of the tempo of your case. The ticking clock is a foundational device in American radio history. If you go back to the classic 1940s thriller Sorry, Wrong Number, the entire plot is driven by the relentless march of the minute hand toward a predicted murder. The audience is kept in a state of high cortisol arousal because they feel time is running out. This is not just a storytelling trope. It is a psychological trigger used to bypass rational thought. In the current year 2026, we see the legal system utilize this exact pacing during the temporary orders phase of a divorce. For a man like Mark, a logistics manager in Ohio, the clock starts ticking the moment he is served. He is often given a very narrow window to respond, usually 21 days, or face a default judgment. This artificial compression of time is designed to induce panic. When humans are rushed, they make mistakes. They concede on long-term custody arrangements just to stop the immediate stress of the ticking clock. Historical trends in family law show that the initial temporary order often becomes the permanent order simply through the inertia of the system. Mark feels he has to settle now to catch his breath, but in the radio drama of his life, he is agreeing to a script that will run for the next 18 years. To stop the clock, you have to understand the concept of pacing control. In the golden age of radio, the director controlled the tempo. If the scene was too frantic, the director would slow down the actor's delivery to force the audience to settle in. In a legal context, this means refusing to be hurried by the opposing side's manufactured emergencies. A common tactic is the Friday afternoon emergency motion. The opposing counsel sends a high-conflict demand at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, knowing that the man will spend the entire weekend in a state of hypervigilance and anxiety, unable to reach his own attorney. They are using the silence of the weekend to amplify the ticking clock in his head. Potential outcomes for men who learn to recognize this as a theatrical device involve a significant reduction in stress and a more measured, logical response. Instead of spiraling, a man who understands pacing control acknowledges the receipt and waits until Monday morning to address it with his team. He refuses to let the other side's metronome dictate his heartbeat. Let us examine the historical case study of Mercury Theater on the air. They were masters of the slow burn. They would start a broadcast with mundane weather reports and ballroom music, slowly layering in the tension until the audience didn't even realize they were being led into a climax. Modern divorce often works in the opposite direction. It starts with a massive explosion of allegations to set a high-stakes tempo, and then drags the process out for years to exhaust the man's financial and emotional reserves. This is known as the exhaustion script. If the other side can't win on the facts, they will try to win on the clock. They know that every month the case continues, the man's legal fees mount and his emotional stamina wanes. We see data suggesting that many men eventually take a suboptimal settlement just to make the noise stop. This is the equivalent of a radio listener turning off the dial because the static has become unbearable. But when you turn off the dial in a divorce, you aren't just ending the noise. You are walking away from your parental rights or your financial future. Imagine if Mark in Ohio viewed his divorce not as a sprint, but as a long-form serialized drama. In a series that runs for 100 episodes, a single bad scene in episode 3 doesn't define the entire show. Men often get caught up in the drama of the moment, the specific text message, the one missed phone call, the heated exchange at a soccer game. They treat every incident like it's a series finale. To regain control of the tempo, you must adopt a seasonal perspective. You are playing the long game. This involves a step-by-step decoupling of your emotional state from the legal calendar. Step 1 is the realization that the legal system is a slow-moving machine. Nothing happens as fast as the letters from the opposing counsel suggest it will. Step 2 is the implementation of a communication buffer. By using a dedicated parenting app or a filtered email address, you remove the instant gratification loop that the ticking clock relies on. You are no longer a live broadcast. You are a recorded program that can be edited and reviewed before it goes to air. There is a fascinating historical parallel in the way radio dramas use recurring motifs to signal danger. In the show Lights Out, a specific eerie whistling would precede a horrific event. In the modern legal arena, these motifs are often found in the language of the motions filed against men. Words like unstable, controlling, or hostile are the eerie whistling of the courtroom. If a man reacts to these labels with actual hostility, he is providing the very sound effect the other side needs to validate their motif. He is literally whistling along with the villain's theme song. To break this cycle, you must provide a counter-motif. If the accusation is that you are hostile, your counter-motif must be one of radical boredom. You become the most boring person in the process. You are punctual, you are polite, you are brief, and you are consistent. Over time, the contrast between the whistling of the accusations and the steady, quiet hum of your actual behavior creates a cognitive dissonance for the judge. They begin to wonder why the soundtrack doesn't match the movie. This brings us to the concept of the third act. In a standard three-act structure, the hero is at his lowest point at the end of the second act. Everything seems lost, the clock is seconds from midnight, and the antagonist seems to have total control. Many men in the middle of a divorce are living in that second act low point. They are being outmaneuvered, their bank accounts are draining, and they haven't seen their children in weeks. The mistake they make is thinking the story ends there. The historical trends of American storytelling tell us that the third act belongs to the person who can maintain their character under the most pressure. In 2026, the potential outcomes for a man who maintains his integrity through the second act low point are vastly superior to those who collapse or lash out. The legal system, for all its flaws, is still a system of records. If you can keep your record clean while the other side exhausts their dramatic energy, the third act, the final trial, or the permanent settlement, often shifts in your favor. We have to look at the data regarding settlement timing. Statistics often show that the vast majority of cases settle on the literal courthouse steps. This is the ultimate ticking clock. Both sides have spent tens of thousands of dollars, and the pressure is at a breaking point. Attorneys use this moment to squeeze concessions out of tired, broken men. They tell you that if you go inside, you might lose everything, so you should sign a deal you hate right now. This is the cliffhanger of the legal world. But if you have prepared your case like a masterclass production, if you have your evidence organized and your broadcast has been consistent for months, you don't have to fear the cliffhanger. You can walk into that courtroom knowing exactly what your script is. As we conclude this exploration of tempo and the ticking clock, we must prepare for an even more subtle form of manipulation. In the radio era, advertisers used subliminal techniques to influence the audience without them knowing it. In the courtroom, this translates to the invisible narrative, the biases and assumptions that a judge brings to the bench before you even open your mouth. How do you identify the invisible script that is already running against you? And more importantly, how do you use the golden age technique of the heroic pivot to change a judge's mind in real time? In the next part, we are going to dive into the psychology of the bench and how to navigate the pre-written biases of the American family court. The psychology of the bench is the ultimate theater. To understand how a judge perceives a man in 2026, we must first look back at the historical trends of radio sponsorship. In the 1930s and 40s, programs weren't just shows, they were owned by brands. We had the Maxwell House Coffee Hour and the Lux Radio Theater. These sponsors dictated the moral tone of the content. They demanded that the hero always be virtuous, the family unit remain sacrosanct, and the transgressor be punished by the final curtain call. The American family court system operates under a similar, albeit invisible, sponsorship of societal norms and statutory presets. Every judge walks into the courtroom with a pre-written script in their head, shaped by decades of case law, personal experience, and institutional bias. For a man, this often means walking into a room where the audience, the judge, has already been conditioned by the cultural broadcast to see him as the expendable part of the family equation. Imagine a man named Robert, a high school history teacher in Virginia. Robert is a dedicated father who has spent every Saturday for the last 5 years coaching his daughter's soccer team. In Robert's mind, his record is clear. But when he walks into the courtroom in 2026, he is not just Robert the teacher. To the judge, he is the respondent in a system that historically views men through the lens of the primary breadwinner archetype rather than the primary caregiver archetype. This is the invisible narrative. If Robert's attorney doesn't actively pivot the story, the judge will subconsciously slot Robert into a 1950s radio trope. The hardworking but emotionally distant father who is better suited for providing a check than providing emotional support. To change this, Robert must execute what we call the heroic pivot. In radio drama, the heroic pivot occurs when a character who has been framed as a villain or a secondary player reveals a depth of character that forces the audience to reevaluate everything they have seen. A classic example is the program The Lone Ranger. In the early episodes, the audience only saw the mask and the mystery, but through consistent acts of integrity and the slow reveal of his backstory, he became the ultimate symbol of justice. For A Man in Divorce, the heroic pivot is not about a grand, dramatic speech. It is about the tactical accumulation of counter-evidence that contradicts the judge's pre-written script. Step 1 of the heroic pivot is identifying the specific archetype the opposing side is trying to pin on you. Are they painting you as the workaholic? The unstable aggressor? The disinterested party? Once you identify the script they are writing for you, every single piece of evidence you present must be a direct strike against that specific characterization. If Robert is being painted as the workaholic, his evidence shouldn't just be that he loves his daughter. It should be a detailed log of every school play, every doctor's appointment, and every soccer practice he attended over the last 3 years. He is using high-fidelity data to jam the frequency of the opposing side's broadcast. Historical trends show that judges, like radio listeners, are prone to confirmation bias. If they hear 3 stories that fit their preconceived notion of a man's behavior, they will tune out the 4th story that contradicts it. This means your heroic pivot must happen early and with overwhelming consistency. In the radio industry, this was known as the first quarter hook. If you didn't capture the audience in the first 15 minutes, they would change the station. In a legal case, if you don't establish your character in the first hearing, the judge might mentally change the station on your case for the next year. Let's look at the data regarding judicial decision-making. Studies in behavioral economics suggest that judges are more likely to grant shared custody to men who present a concrete, granular parenting plan rather than those who simply ask for more time. Why? Because a granular plan is a professional broadcast.